Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. You have to go right to the top. Up the top, you have to put your hand on the bar. Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. You can do it, but you have to. I did it yesterday. You can climb up on here if you want. You just have to get up there and on the chair or something and push it over a little bit, I think. That's what we did the other day. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Go Premanandi. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Gaunitai ki jai. Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki. Shri Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai. Yamuna Maya ki. Ganga Maya ki. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki. Harinama Sankirtan ki. Brihat Mridanga ki. Shri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj ki. Gaura Premanandi. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glorious to Sri Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyavari Pastachate Shatari. Hare Krishna. Haribo. Jai Haribo. Come along in. Are you in Vrindavan? Not going, are you staying still in Calcutta, Mayapur, or where are you staying?
I'm staying here.
Staying in Vrindavan now.
I'm doing Seva here.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, marvelous. Fantastic. You can come forward, everybody. Just to get, come forward a little bit. The couch is empty also for those who need chairs. Please sit on the couch. Come forward. Come on, Gopal, come forward. You have to, the cows will be, you have to herd the cows very shortly. They'll be going home in a few minutes. You got your stick in your bag there for the cows. Monkeys, yeah. You can use it to herd the cows. We may need to put the fan on. One of the problems being is that at this time of night mosquitoes start coming. I get a lot of mosquitoes here after you all leave. Because the door, they come through the corridor. Yeah. Then that way you can close the other gate, then we have to get up and open it each time. I guess the devotees know to come in. Jai.
We need the remote control to increase the fan.
I'm not sure. I never thought about that. I've got no idea.
So I saw Mahananda 2 days ago that he was in the bedroom.
Is it? Yeah, he's here now. Maybe he knows how to put the fan higher, because the mosquitoes will come in. So, well, if we keep it like that, there's air coming through there. But if you need this to be increased, I have no problem. But I don't know how to do it. If someone knows how to increase that, if everyone likes it increased, then so be it.
You use the
Yeah, you cannot increase this.
remote control. Use the remote control in the bedroom. Is it working with this one?
There is no button to increase.
No, it's the
Nothing.
You need the remote control. I can.
If you know where it is.
Okay, I'll have. Can I? It's also in the bedroom.
Oh. Hare Krishna. Om Jnanaatimirandasya. Please come here. Jnananjana Shalakaya चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुक्तकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपदान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी कृष्णभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यश्च पतितनं वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिसिद्धान्त सरस्वती इति नामिने श्रीवासवानवी देवी दयिताय कृपब्दये कृष्ण संबंध विज्ञान दायिने प्रभवे नमः माधोयोज्वाल प्रेमज्ञ श्रीरूपनुग भक्तिदा श्री गौर करुण शक्ति विग्रहाय नमोस्तुते नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्रीमूर्तये दीनतारिणे रूपानुग विरुद्ध अपसिद्धांत द्वन्द्वहारिणे. Hare Krishna. For those who are coming for the first time this evening, we've been reading from the last night at least, from the Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava, and this is part 1 of this book, compiled by His Holiness Bhakti-Vikas Swami Maharaj. He researched this for 20 or 30 years before this book was completed, from maybe 25 years, sometime in the 80s, late 80s maybe, he started the research. And of course, you know, when you start any kind of research, one thing leads to another, and you don't realize the depth of, what you're looking at. And unfortunately, when he realized the depth, most of those who were in that area had left the world. He also discovered, for whatever reason, a large section of the literatures were no longer available. For whatever various reasons, and different devotees said different things. But many devotees were still around. Sridhar Maharaj was not around. He'd left the world, and so had Kunja Bihari and Ananta Vasudev. They'd already, you could say the main assistants in many ways in Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's missionary activity. Others were around, but most of them had departed. There were a few around, but very few. And it was mainly from literatures which he came across, what he heard disciples, or what had been written by the previous devotees or disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, or spoken by their disciples. But an amazing compilation of revelations, compilation of transcendental truths, and in many ways we can say a very strong affirmation of, not that we need it, but it is there anyway, of our Srila Prabhupada and how he preached and continued that legacy of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj continued the legacy of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was, you could say, the real revolutionary, because up from the time of Vishwanath Chakravarti, in a certain way you can say for sure, in between, but practically speaking from the time of Shyamananda Pandit and Srinivas and Narottam and some of their followers, like Rasikananda and others, the pure preaching of Lord Chaitanya's teaching was almost non-existent. And any pure followers were basically not preachers. They were some recluses, Babajis, but there was no pure preaching. And Vaishnavism, in the eyes of the general public, because we're talking here of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, not Sri Sampradaya or the strict Madhvas, they were respected and were upholding, to a large degree at least, the teachings of their acharyas. But the Gaudiya line from Lord Chaitanya had really all but collapsed to such a state that it was looked down upon by the general. Well, see, Gaudiya Vaishnavism was hardly heard of outside of Bengal and Orissa, and a little bit in Vrindavan, of course. But otherwise it was unheard of in India. Bhaktivinoda Thakur resurrected, you could say, resurrected the path of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by revealing to the world, here she is, Hari Bol Jayavadi, Hare Krishna. I'd like to thank Jayavadi. She has an apartment just a few doors along, and she's given free usage of that apartment for the devotees to stay in, or two of them are staying. And thank you very much. She's staying under a tree round the corner. Right. Not quite, but thank you very much. We did discuss a little bit about the transcendental nature of how that happened yesterday, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's transcendental situation, to reveal again that the Lord Chaitanya Manobishta, his inner intentions and his mission, and the means to fulfill that. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur basically set everything in, at least in motion in terms of the groundwork in his writings and his preaching. He didn't go in certain areas which were taken up by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was, from the material point of view, would be seen to be very accommodating. He wasn't so... Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was seen to be a very, discriminatory, and many people accuse him of being very like that, not very accommodating. But that was part of the plan, just like we see in the history of religion, how at different times the Lord comes, or he sends his representatives to present, maybe not the full subject matter, but that which is required to be able to go further. Unfortunately, most people get stuck on that level. But we have histories like, for instance, Lord Buddha, Lord Jesus Christ, Shankaracharya. They all had their, essential parts to play, but none of them presented the entire package, you could say. But it was required, because at that point of time, the population was not really ready for, taking the full thing, full dose. most people are not ready for the full dose, even now. Miracles have taken place, there's no doubt. I mean, Bhaktivinoda Thakur did not really preach outside of Bengal or Orissa. Maybe some devotees took the message, but South India was almost untouched. West India untouched. North India pretty much untouched. The rest of the world was almost exclusively untouched. He did send some of his literatures to the Western Hemisphere, but they ended up just being in some libraries or universities here and there, but with no immediate effect. I mean, seeds were planted. So he sent some literature, incomprehensible or to the people in general, you could say. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was the empowered representative, Rupa Goswami's expansion practically, as the son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, then continued in the you could say a much more stronger vein, same message. He didn't write his own books particularly, but he was editing and producing the books of his father, which had mostly not been published. And he edited them because he was a very first-class English scholar, and also all languages, which he knew anyway, Aryan, Bengali, especially Bengali and English, Sanskrit. So he edited his father's literature, if necessary, of course, and published it. That was one of his biggest, you could say, preaching moves. And he also then preached the essence of Bhaktivinoda's teachings, which is Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion, uncompromised, unmotivated devotional service. So at that time, even aside from the degraded nature of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in most cases, there were other branches, as we discussed yesterday, very prominent, not just in Bengal, but in other places here, for instance, the caste Goswamis and the all kinds of the Jati Gosais and all kinds of other groups who were adamant that they were the representatives of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but they had, you could say, perverted in various ways, they compromised in various ways the teachings, and they were blocking the appearance of pure devotion and blocking the way for other living entities to come to that path of pure devotion. Putting a dam up, and Lord Nishananda took down the dam of pure devotional service. They were basically putting the dam back up as much as they could, contaminating the water, whatever came through. So things were in a sorry state. So Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj very strongly preached against casteism. When we say casteism, we're referring to the caste brahmanas, those who are adamant it's by birth that your designation is established. And it's a hereditary right of the Brahmins alone, born Brahmins, that is, to be like the spiritual leaders in society. And what other groups are there that we discussed? What other groups? Besides all the Apasampadayas, the owls and the bowls and the Gaur-Nagaris, and there's the Hajjas and the this one and that one. Mayavadis, strong Mayavadi influence was there. And there were others too, forgotten, tired. But so many groups who were opposed to Brahmos, and he had to deal with all, of course, other religions were there also, but he didn't deal so much with other religions. There was not much interaction. But with so-called Vaishnava groups, very conservative traditionalists and so on, as well as the empiricists and the scholastic sector of society, the wave of scientific influence which was coming in. He strongly, even the philanthropic aspect, the socialists, the reformists, the independent movement, so many other groups there who were, you could say in many ways, were opposed, or not, at least not in agreement with the teachings which Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was strongly propagating. So he had to deal with all of this, and very strongly he sent some of his disciples to us. So we had first a few books and then a few disciples. Again, not that much result when they're going to the West. Something, but not much. More or less it was a disappointment. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj did preach literally more widely. He established a mission. Bhaktivinoda Thakur did not have so much of an institutionalized arrangement. He had a Namahata situation, but it was quite loose. It wasn't very, it wasn't institutionalized. It didn't have so much, they would fade away or divert their attention into, mixing it with, all the apasampradayas, the devious groups and so on. It wasn't very black and white. Bhaktisiddhanta made it pretty black and white, and he's trained up. He was really interested in serious followers. He didn't bat an eyelid. You know that term, bat an eyelid? It didn't make any difference to him. Well, it did in a sense, but he didn't kind of show it much. If insincere devotees were persons who wanted to compromise, went away because he didn't accommodate it. They may have been initiated or not, but he wasn't interested in, watering things down. He had to establish the strict path. So there was a very strong heart or foundation to the mission. And a lot of opposition, of course, was obviously there. He said he went also all around India, right to the south. He went to Kanyakumari, went to Kerala, Karnataka. He went all over India, Punjab. He went to what was then part of India, Pakistan, East Bengal. He went to all these places, especially East Bengal. Of course, it was very much Vaishnava, so-called Vaishnava country. And most of his followers were from East Bengal, now Bangladesh. And here also, Vrindavan. His father had established a residence in Radhakund for service. Like that, and he sent his disciples here and there. So South India, not so much, but established there in Madras, mainly Madras. Madras was the main outpost of the Gaudiya Math, but very few devotees joined from South India, very few. 90% or more were from Bengal and Orissa. It was still very much, not really being captured by the rest of India, although it was accepted and they were perhaps coming and a few devotees joined, but not that much. Gujarat, not much at all. And in central India, Madhya Pradesh, not much. Maharashtra, Bombay, that's about it. Not so much. So what you see now is a miracle from Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's time, where of course all the, I wouldn't even say seeds necessarily, but you could say seeds, were planted, the direction was given, the empowerment was there. As we heard yesterday, when one of his disciples was indirectly saying that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj did not know exactly how to preach outside of India. And of course he chastised him very heavily and said, you're just going there and seeing it with your temporary vision. I've been seeing this for millions of lifetimes. what to do. And of course, you could say the cream of that endeavor was Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, that he would take this message and fulfill this mission of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who said the day will come when, the fair-skinned men from their side will come to Mayapur, embracing the local devotees. And in all the towns and villages of the world, the holy name will be chanted. They will go through the streets, and he lists Paris, London, this one, that one, dancing and chanting the holy name with drums and kartals and banners and flags and what have you. That day will come when all the religions of the world will flow into the Ekadharma, the one religion of Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion. That will take time, but it's slowly evolving. The first part is there, and he also predicted that very soon a personality will come who will fulfill this prediction. It's pretty obvious who that is. You have to work very hard to conclude anything other than that. So, of course, the preaching is now going on, and since Srila Prabhupada established centers mostly around the world, a few here in India, our Prabhupada, Gaudiya Math was here and there, and Prabhupada established temples here and there in India, but not so many. But now what you see is amazing. In South India, in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, in Kerala, in all these states, in the south of India, Telangana, what do they call it? Telangana? They've split Andhra Pradesh in two. Andhra Pradesh is still one, and then they split it. Telangana, I think it's called now. And so many devotees, hundreds of thousands of devotees are there. There's one devotee preaching in Kerala. On his online Bhagavad Gita course, there are 700,000 people, including 200 university professors who are now chanting 16 rounds a day. It's just, this is the revolution. This is the real independence movement. It's not just getting independence from this government or this country or whatever it is. Or, in the West we have so many independence movements. Gay liberation, women's liberation, animals liberation, you name it. There'll be men's liberation next. Nobody knows what it means. This is the real revolution. What does revolution means? It's interesting because Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj gave this definition. It's also there in ancient texts, maybe in modern too, I don't know. Ancient dictionaries will tell you what a revolution means. It means to bring things back to its normal condition, its original state. So that's why, again, this Krishna consciousness is the only real revolutionary movement. Others may be, preparing people for that. That's what they're meant for, but this is the real revolution. So we're reading a very important section. It's called Service to Scripture, or Shastra. How do we... Service to Scripture means to not to change it, that's one thing, and to also know what is relevant, and to preach that which is relevant, according to situations you're in. Not to change it, but to know what aspects of Scriptures are relevant. Sometimes because of our imperfect senses, our limited understanding, we exclude certain Scriptures because we don't understand them, or they seem to contradict our attachments. Different Scriptures are there to regulate our attachments. Persons who don't want to give up material attachments oftentimes decry scriptures which recommend, detachment or whatever you want to call it. Or, let's say, something beyond their vision. And this is not necessarily the people, by the way, the leaders, because otherwise they'll lose control of their followers. They'll no longer have power and, worship are two most powerful, say, binding and attachments in this world. Controlling others' power. When you keep people in the dark, it's very easy to control them. Much easier, anyway. As soon as they get enlightened and they start to see things differently, then you can lose control, and it's not, people. And that happens everywhere, materially, spiritually, especially in the path of religion. Don't, you condemn everything outside of your limited scope. It happens in the path of yoga, it happens in all the religions, and it happens in our own Krishna consciousness to a certain extent. Maybe not institutionally, but at least individually or collectively in some cases. Anything beyond, this level is, you're not allowed to go there. Of course, you don't go there if you're not ready to go there, but that doesn't mean, you're permanently prohibited. It's not like an offense to, something. And those scriptures, like bogus or something. They may not be relevant, but that's an offense against the holy name to, blaspheme, criticize Vedic literatures. You don't criticize literature, you criticize the misuse of it or the perverted presentation of it, or denial of it, etc. We'll read on where we left off yesterday, which was the transcendental approach to scripture. Srila Saraswati Thakur wanted his disciples to imbibe a service attitude. This is very important for all of us. To imbibe a service attitude and not become bookworms. You know what bookworms are? Who knows what a bookworm is? You could say it's that little creature that eats books. But in terms of humans, what's a bookworm?
Someone who just reads the books.
Just reads and reads and reads, but does nothing with it and does nothing else. Just reads and reads. We have a common phenomenon nowadays, it's scholar worms. There are certain people who just study for decades. They do nothing with it. They take one degree after another, and they do nothing. They're sort of scholars. You can use that for the welfare of society, but I don't seem that some of them just seem to want to study. Anyway, bookworms. He wasn't keen on just being a bookworm. He would say that the ability to turn the pages of books and cast one's eyes on their contents does not constitute the qualification to comprehend them. You can try to ram it in, cram it in, remember it, but that's not necessary comprehension. Particularly the esoteric works of self-realized acharyas. Sometimes devotees prematurely, and we've mentioned this many times, this word in English, premature. It's a very interesting word, composure, yeah. How it's composed, isn't it? We say, that he's trying to become, reach Raganuga Bhakti prematurely, we say. Not ready for it. So if you take the word prematurely, which is, action, form of premature, then prema, it becomes prema too early. amazing how it's I don't know if it's purposely done like that, but it's so close to the same words. That's what it means, prematurely. Yes, our goal is prema. There's no other goal whatsoever. But, it doesn't just come by trying to make it happen. It's another subject. So we try to read these literatures, and we understand that's the goal, but to comprehend them is another thing, and we're trying to live or explain beyond our adhikar. It's not correct. It's not unbona fide, you could say. And he described this. He gave the example that without meaningful, this is on a practical level here, he gave the example that without meaningful engagement in Krishna's seva, inordinate poring over texts is like licking the outside of a honey jar. We haven't got access to enter in. You can see it's there. You might read the label that this is the sweetest of the sweet nectar, topmost ecstasy or whatever. And we lick the label, but you don't get it by licking the label. You become eligible. And that eligibility is, yes, it's you can say we have to deserve it, we have to endeavor for it, but ultimately it's given by Krishna. He clears the path so that you can enter or proceed on that path. For the taste and nourishment derived from Krishna Bhakti cannot be attained merely by studying it. One must actually perform Bhakti to experience it. He repeatedly quoted the stanza, Sevan Mukke hi jiva do. Many of you are familiar with that term and the verse which it is found in. What is that verse? You know the English translation? More or less. Anybody not like to give us?
Devotional service done by the tongue.
What? That's Seva Mukha He Jiva Do. But the whole verse is with our blunt. With our blunt material senses, you cannot possibly understand this transcendental subject. But devotional service beginning by practicing devotional service beginning with the tongue, everything in time, Krishna reveals everything. Everything becomes revealed. It starts with the tongue, taking prasadam. It's part of it, but particularly chanting. Sankirtan chanting, beginning with the tongue. But that's beginning with, it doesn't end there. It's beginning with, we've got to hear also. And we also have to say, the mind, we also have to contain within our mind the subject matter. Out of his own mercy, Krishna reveals all scriptural conclusions to those who please him by their service attitude. Pleasing Krishna by a service, devotional service, is supposed to be anukulyena krishnanushilanam. What does that mean? These are simple. Very important, yeah.
Favorable for Krishna.
Yeah, that which pleases. Devotional service, in a personal definition, we could say, is that which brings pleasure to Krishna, basically speaking. The details of that are another thing, but the general picture is that which brings pleasure to Krishna. Devotional service. The details may be given by a representative of Krishna, spiritual master, or in society, varnashram, whatever, may give different directions which will lead ultimately, if followed properly, to increasing pleasure for Krishna. That's the idea of devotional service, to bring pleasure to Krishna. Trying to understand the absolute truth merely by learning and cerebration is like trying to see the sun at night by holding a torch. It's ludicrous to try to see the sun at night by holding a torch. It's like, some people think that by, learning, and you get this a lot, if you go on Sankirtan, here in India, in the West, you meet Hindus, particularly Hindus. I know all these things. This I am knowing. I am knowing Bhagavad Gita. I am having Bhagavad Gita. I know Bhagavad Gita. Have you ever heard that sort of thing?
Oh yes, especially today.
Today, he was just doing books in the temple today, so many, self-realized souls were coming and they already knew everything. They didn't need to buy a book. They already realized everything. I am knowing these things.
Just ask how many chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, I have to go now. So.
Yeah. What to do? Once he related how he himself had imbibed Shastriya conclusions. This quote Bhaktisiddhanta. From early childhood I heard from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur about the unique qualities of Lord Chaitanya. The Thakur would say that only he who has greed, taste and respect for unmotivated service to the Lord can overcome ignorance. In my childhood he also taught me the method of chanting the holy names, and thus from that time I had opportunity to hear about offences to the name, namabhas, and the special characteristics of the name. He was not in favour of excessive study. He would say that people who study too much often lose their intelligence, and their pride increases. Very common thing. Not always, but this often is the case. Erudition that is incongenial to Hari Seva has no value. Or sometimes we hear if it doesn't help us to increase our service mood, Hari Seva. Chanting also, the service mood should also be developing. The favourable service mood should naturally be developing. At this point, a college student, one of several persons to whom Srila Saraswati Thakur was speaking, interjected, "If we don't learn reading and writing, then how can we study Shastra?" Srila Saraswati Thakur replied, "I have imbibed the meaning of all the scriptures by observing the exemplary character of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and my Gurudev, Paramahamsa Babaji. One cannot realize the true purpose of Shastra by expertise in grammar or by memorizing roots and endings of words. If that were so, then the great worldly professors would have comprehended the factual import of Shastra. But they don't understand anything. Practically nothing at all. Scientists, scholars, next to nothing about the actual essence of Shastra. They can only understand according to their very relative perspectives, and naturally they see it differently. Not that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not want his disciples to read Shastra, but he was concerned that they do so with the proper attitude. He accepted study as genuinely devotional only if undertaken for self-purification and to gain knowledge for preaching, and warned against the desire to become a pandit for self-aggrandizement or intellectual sense enjoyment. Hear from the lips of a pure devotee, he said. Your guru will tell you which books to read, one by one. Those who pore through myriad texts without the instructions of the guru will never get bhakti. Read every single scripture, but bhakti will not descend. Bhakti is not contained in that way. It's not that bhakti is locked up in the scriptures. Scriptures indicate the path to evoke bhakti. Prabhupada even humorously, in a sense, chastises one of his disciples. He called him Panditji. Wherever he had this big trunk of books. Probably had to pay a lot of money to get them on the plane. Nowadays you don't. Then it wasn't so difficult. But there's so many books you simply carry around, but you read none of them. We accumulate huge libraries sometimes and read nothing. This book, that book. Now the book tables, sometimes in ISKCON you look on the book table and you can hardly see Prabhupada's books. And then amongst the myriad of countless other books, from everything from mind control to yoga to, health to, I don't know, it goes on and on, the list. Even there are non-devotional books there written by somebody outside who's supposed to help us to practice devotional service, some psychologist or sociist or something. Full of it, isn't it? In many places it's like that. Every devotee is writing books, one after the next. What are you supposed to do? And you read this one, and you read that one, you get confused because this one says one thing and that one says another thing. You don't know what to do with it all. Or you conclude that this is real because it fits your conditioning. Then you don't agree with the real thing because it doesn't fit your conditioning. So complicated. We're making everything so complicated. Prabhupada made everything very simple. What to do? It's one of the challenges. You don't even need books now, it's all online. Everything's online, huh? Just download it. That leads to another. They quote some, karmi, whatever, this and that, and then you go look at that book as well. Maybe go to the outsider book, and on it may go. Your guru will tell you which books to read one by one. Those who pore through myriad texts without the instructions of the guru will never get bhakti. On the other hand, if you do not read at all, you will become a prakrita sahajya. So now look at the other side. Prabhupada said, if you don't read my books, you'll fall down. You have to read them, but you don't just read. You have to put what you read in practice. Apply it in your life. So then you have to know what is applicable, relevant. And many of us have already read the Bhagavad Gita. We don't need to read it. I read that already. What next? We don't even follow the Bhagavad Gita. If you look back at the Bhagavad Gita and really see how much are we following, you'll be surprised. We may even preach what we don't follow sometimes. We're meant to apply it. Huh? It's not easy, but that's, again, coupled with the seva, the service attitude, and the mercy of the Lord. These points become, when we apply it, then naturally the qualities should evolve. They should naturally develop as we apply the teachings. You had a late night?
Yes.
Some of the boys were dancing at 2 o'clock in the morning this morning. On the Parikara path, every morning at 1:30, 2 o'clock, there's thousands and thousands of devotees go on Parikara. The opposite way round? They go the other way round, is that right? They don't go clockwise, they go anti-clockwise. They go anti-clockwise. I don't know what for they're doing this, but they're doing it. Whoops. Thank you, Paul. But they're going every morning, apparently, since we've been here. I don't know if this is a permanent arrangement, but some religious, spiritual group are very... It is wonderful in one sense. These things never used to happen. It may not be Shuddha Bhakti, it may be, I do not know. But even yesterday we read Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he said, even the ringing of the bells in the temple by the neophyte is far, far greater than opening thousands of hospitals. It's the beginning of your spiritual path, maybe. So we know what level those devotees are on, but it's amazing that so many people are doing this. It's another miracle that's taking place, in a sense. Brahmachari, so be careful. If we don't read it all, we can become very much... take things very lightly and cheaply, and compromise comes in and so many things. A brahmachari, once their intelligence becomes weak, Prabhupada said, you read, it helps you strengthen the intelligence so you don't become easily affected by compromise, either in our mind or outside and so on. A brahmachari once took some titles from the mat bookstore for his personal reading. This is me. Without informing the manager. I did this the other day in Bombay. And Gurunatha was with me. I wanted this book, but there was no one around. We waited and waited, so eventually it was a small book. I just took it. I stole it from the bookstore. Let's see. Regarding this unauthorized act as serious, Srila Saraswati Thakur instructed the brahmachari not to keep books. By intensive study you might become a pandit, but you may not be a devotee. Hearing from sadhus is sufficient and indeed essential. It was Prabhupada's words, written words. You attend when someone is talking about, how much should we hear. And you attend the morning program and the evening program. And if you have any extra time, then you read. Morning program was 1 hour class, evening 1 hour class. So 2 hours a day, that was what Prabhupada gave as standard, which of course we don't follow as a general rule. Some may. But in most temples they don't establish, it's not established as a kind of a must in the program. I mean, the morning program is more or less, although not necessarily 1 hour, but more or less it's there. Evening program, hardly there at all. Hardly. So reading, whenever you get spare time. We discussed that yesterday. Won't go further. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explained that hearing could be truly beneficial if accompanied by faith and submissiveness rather than an academic spirit. Although he himself was decidedly philosophical, he cautioned against a solely intellectual approach to spiritual knowledge, emphasizing the superiority of avaroha panta. This is the descending process of receiving transcendental knowledge through bona fide guru parampara. And the inadequacy, so we have avaroha panta, the path of knowledge coming down, and we have aroha panta. What is it? Aroha panta, the ascending attempt to quantify reality by empirical observation and logical argument, trying to understand things through our own conditioning. even scripture. Of course we try to understand, we try to analyze, but we hear from, descending. You inquire, you receive clarification, direction in terms of service and processes, so, which thus pleases Krishna, and then Krishna clears things. We heard in other places this quite a few times actually, in Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's examples given in here, persons who came with their inquisitiveness or their analytical approach to Krishna consciousness. And in some cases he wouldn't really reciprocate the way they expected. There was one scholastic devotee or person, he became a devotee. He was very learned scholar, Sanskrit scholar. He wanted to discuss some very intricate points with Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, but there's two examples. One of them, he sent him to the gardener. His name was Ramdas, I think. He was illiterate, completely. He never read a single book in his life. He sent it to him to get, clarification on his points of, question. A Sanskrit scholar, he had all these questions about the Vedanta, the Veda, this, that, the other. Said, you go find this devotee, his name's Ramdas, ask where he is, and you can he'll clear up your doubts. So he went to him, and he said, because this man had already approached back, he was already taking shelter, and he asked, can you please, this is it. He said, can you please, I want to associate with one of your most learned scholars so he can teach me all the Bhakti Shastras. That's what he said. This is a different one to that one you heard. I want to know all the intricacies of Bhakti Shastra. So he said, you go and learn. He's the expert, Ramdas. You go and hear from him. So he went there. Ramdas was in the garden digging potatoes, cleaning out the garbage. He said, Guru Maharaj has sent me to you to learn all the philosophical tenets of the scriptures, etc. Sanskrit explanation. He said, sure. I think there's a mistake here. I don't know. I've never read any books in my life. I don't know anything about this. I think he's made a mistake. Got the wrong person here. I'm just a gardener, I don't know anything. So he went back to Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj and said, no. You go back and you have to beg him to teach you. So he was a bit bewildered, but he was submissive, so he went back. They were both kind of a bit bewildered. And he said, well, all I know is to do whatever my Guru Maharaj tells me to do. I don't know anything else. And it clicked. That's all the scriptures are telling you what to do. That's all it is. Basically, it doesn't mean, a little common sense there, but that's basically the bottom line. Said, whatever my spiritual master wants me to do, I try to do it, that's all. I don't know much else. I'm not qualified for anything else. The same instruction was given by Lord Chaitanya, by Ishvara Puri, right, to Lord Chaitanya. You're just a fool. You can't understand the Vedanta. Who do you think you are? You just chant Hare Krishna, right? Called him a fool. Lord Chaitanya. So who do we think we are? Of course, different examples that are in Gaur Leela, but that's like one which is foundational. Foundational. They don't take to the path which is the chanting and that congregational chanting, then how will we ever understand? Even if we can repeat all the verses, even if we have all the stories, you're entertained of us, but it won't change the heart. I'll just go back here. Inadequacy of Arohapanta, the ascending attempt to quantify reality by empirical observation and logical argument, for our own analysis, you could say, which, although useful in ascertaining basic principles of reality, is ineffective in higher matters that are inherently inconceivable. We just heard that with our materialistic approach. They cannot be conceived. They're descending. They're revealed. They're not ascertainable by any amount of study or austerities or any kind of pious activity. Not at all. Meditation, none of these things in of themselves can evoke the appearance of this transcendental realization that's given. It's bestowed upon. Srila Saraswati Thakur condemned as a wild goose chase. You heard that term? Wild goose chase. Very common in England. How to put it in other terms? Well, it speaks for itself in some ways. You know, a wild goose, you know what a goose is? That kind of a big duck, you know, a very big one. You try to chase them. Try to chase a wild goose. It's not easy. A wild goose chase. They can fly, by the way. The endeavor, he said, like a wild goose chase, the endeavor of jnanis and mundane academics to try to measure and understand the sum total of everything, considering themselves the subject and all else, including Krishna, the object. In other words, they think they can contain the absolute within their realm of their own ability, their own knowledge, their own mind and intellect and so on. You cannot do that. Not Krishna keeps himself well away from such persons. Just like he keeps himself, or rather, you could say in the case of Brahma or Ravana, who tried to steal away Krishna's devotees or his consort, but they could not get anywhere near. They thought they could, but they didn't. They just got an illusory reflection or form. So Krishna gives them this illusory conviction. It's not the real thing. Just a reflection or shadow of the real thing. He would warn, don't try to comprehend everything by your puppy brains. Prabhupada used that term. It came from Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. What can you understand with your puppy brain? You know, a puppy dog. Accordingly, the scholarly ethos of the Gaudiya Math was tempered with a vision that learning is not in of itself the goal. There's a short footnote here. Certain Prakriti Sahajas consider it non-devotional to read anything other than rasa shastras. Is a sign of the Prakriti Sahajas. They don't like to hear about Kurukshetra. They don't like to hear about the battle of Kurukshetra. They don't want to know anything about Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. They don't want to know anything about rules and regulations. They don't want to know anything about the Bhagavad Gita. They simply want to hear Rasa Shastra. But their senses are not controlled. Their minds are not controlled. They don't follow any authority except for themselves. And this is not pleasing to Krishna. Simple as that. You may think it's pleasing to your senses. You may impress others. They roll on the ground. You see it commonly. Even now you still see it. They'll come and sometimes roll on the ground and make loud noises, start crying. You've seen it in Bengal commonly. Gopal's from Bengal. And many people are impressed. They think, well, he's in ecstasy. He's a great devotee. Prakriti Sahaja and many other things, others do too. It's not the only symptom, but it's one of the common symptoms displayed externally. Show off. Accordingly, we read that learning is not the goal of itself. That acquisition of knowledge was desirable only as a function of and subordinate to the bhakti principle of surrendered service. Surrendered service. Bhakti Shastri is there to help us to realize our constitutional position. I've never heard the devotees in Goloka Vrindavan studying Shastra. They might do for some, pastime or another, but it's not a practice which they undergo. Oh, we've got to study it to see how to serve Krishna today. Let's see. Well, have you got the cookbook? Okay, we have what's the cookbook Shastra, what's it called? Is there a Purana, a cooking Purana? Huh? Higher taste. The good superior. Well, it's not like they're sitting with cookbooks next to them as they're cooking for Krishna in the morning. Well, studying this and that. They're absorbed in the constitutional nature. His spontaneous, natural desire to bring pleasure to Krishna, everything manifests from the pure motivation. And that the attitude of service in conjunction with hearing from pure devotees was itself the vital factor in acquiring and realizing such knowledge. With Ram Das, he asked, how did you, get this conviction? He said, I simply, whenever I can, I listen to my spiritual master speak. Whatever he speaks, I follow it. That's all. A very simple devotee. Some disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati have become learned even without much study, just by regularly and attentively hearing from him and rendering Hari Seva under his direction. Jati Shekhar Prabhu recalled that when he received the Bhakti Shastri degree, he had not thoroughly studied even Bhagavad Gita, let alone Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and so on. He had become knowledgeable simply by regularly listening to his exalted Guru. Upon later undertaking extensive study of scripture, he found that everything he had previously heard from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was fully corroborated in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and other Vedic texts. Srila Saraswati Thakur instructed his disciples according to the prohibition against Bahu Grantha Kalabhyasa. That's another thing Prabhupada brought out with his Panitji also. And it's you read partial study of many books. You read a bit of this one, a bit of that one, a bit of this one, a bit of that one. You take some, try to glue it all together, patchwork study. He don't riffle through multiple books and lug them around like an ass. 50 books, I do that. Sometimes I'm trying to reduce. I would carry like 20 books in my bag and read none of them on the journey, going for 2 months to India or Australia or something. Bag of books. I don't read any of them. Sometimes I do that. Now you all have Kindles and mobiles and this and that, but we used to only have books. He did not want that, what we said here, they said, better to read and know thoroughly a few. He did not want that Mathvasis have personal libraries, those living in a temple. To those more inclined to study than to preach, he would say, what is the use of your knowing so much Shastra? In Kali Yuga, who will understand? Better to go out and preach. And real learning gives rise to preaching. In one who is actually learned, the desire to make others learned automatically arises. So this is one of the symptoms of learning, is you want to preach. You want to give it to others. Don't just want to hold it to yourself for the sake of it. Around 1920, his initiated disciple, Gauridas Brahmachari humbly requested permission to study Sanskrit grammar to be able to read the original text of Srimad Bhagavatam and other Shastras. Oh. Srila Saraswati Thakur warned him that inherent in such an attempt was the danger of one's intelligence becoming perverted. And this often happens. Not always, by any means, but often happens. Devotees go here and there to study Sanskrit scholarship and end up giving up their bhakti, practically. At least giving up their connection and become scholars. They think they know better. I have a better understanding of these scriptures than my Guru Maharaj. This quite often happens. It took in Prabhupada's time. Several times it happened. And since then also. Or, in order to further your devotional service, we had this extreme example in England. One devotee who realized that, we need so much needed counseling. Devotees were having difficulties, so he kind of went away from the association of devotees to learn counseling. Didn't ever come back again, practically. Got entangled in another world. Big preacher. Very careful. We may have to learn certain things in the, path of devotion, but not at the expense of losing one's devotion. You have to be very careful. Association. Srila Saraswati warned him that inherent in such attempt was the danger of one's intelligence becoming perverted. He told of a person who had approached Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji with a similar proposal, but ultimately became a professional Bhagavatam reciter, fallen from the principles of Shuddha Bhakti. They were attracted. That happens sometimes. There are many devotees, even as here in Vrindavan, there are many devotees who were in the Brahmachari ashram before it become, some of them trying to be professional reciters, or they become some kind of self-proclaimed, Babaji or something or another, living in Vrindavan. Started their own thing. They sometimes dress in strange ways, do all sorts of funny things. They miss the point. Right? They may have read this, and heard from this and that. Or they become an offender of Vaishnavas. He advised Gauridas that he would be better benefited by utilizing his literary aspirations in service to the Gauranga printing works. Later, by perusing Harinamrita Vyakarana under a street light in Mayapur, after others had retired for the night, Gauridas became so proficient in Sanskrit as to pass with distinction a government examination held in Calcutta. That was a book compiled by Jiva Goswami. Who compiled that? Jiva? I think Jiva. On, Krishna conscious, all the names of Krishna, learning Sanskrit. So he studied that, and he became a learned scholar in Sanskrit, which was what he wanted. This accomplishment was exuberated over in both Gaudiya and Nadia Prakash, as proof of the knowledge-giving nature of unmotivated devotional service. For it was hardly expected that such a complex subject could be mastered without considerably more application. Krishna gave him what he wanted there. Once Srila Saraswati Thakur asked an unschooled brahmachari disciple whose principal service was tending the mat garden, "What do you know of Tattva-gyan?" This is great. This is the story expanded, which I briefly mentioned. The brahmachari replied, "I regularly hear from you and try to absorb what you say." Srila Saraswati Thakur then asked him to relate something of what he had understood, upon which the illiterate devotee began to expound various sublime philosophical truths. Srila Saraswati Thakur then explained to the other devotees present, "This is evidence of Sevan Mukhe Ijivado. One can perceive Krishna by his blessing. This boy has not studied Sanskrit or Shastra, nor is he fluent in Bengali, yet he knows so many Siddhantas. Most great pandits cannot comprehend what I am saying, but this uneducated lad has grasped it all. Ramdas was a gardener and labourer at Sri Chaitanya Math, low-born and unlettered. He was ever busy in menial tasks, toiling in the fields, sweeping paths, throwing out the garbage. Doesn't this remind you a little bit of Jayananda Prabhu? Those who know who Jayananda Prabhu is. He was doing all these things and more. And he also wasn't a scholar by any means. But he realized all the meanings of what Prabhupada was saying by rendering totally surrendered service. And, well, even he wasn't able to listen so much because he was working so hard that he would be, very tired when class time came along. Or he was rendering service during class. But Prabhupada was very merciful, and seeing his surrendered attitude, the Lord revealed everything within his heart. He grasped it all. One time, Danavir, in the early days, asked the question, how can you advance in Krishna consciousness? He said, I don't know. I don't have time to think about that. I'm too busy in service. I have no time to think about that. Interesting answer, isn't it? I haven't got time to think about that. That's the actual answer, of course. It wasn't like a Shastric statement. It was a reality of his personal relationship with Prabhupada. All the while, whilst he was doing that, he was chanting the Maya Mantra. If anyone were to chastise him, he would humbly accept it and continue chanting and performing his duties. That's another test of a devotee. And especially when we're very learned, sometimes we get very upset when someone challenges. Questions, often the case. We start arguing, defending, etc. But a real devotee doesn't, He's not affected like that. Of course, if there's a blasphemous statement or something, then they'll react, but otherwise they're not affected. So he was like that. He had received Harinam but not Diksha, which Srila Saraswati Thakur had said was not required for him, as he would achieve everything by Harinam and Dham Seva. Just by Harinam initiation, didn't need anything else. And Harinam initiation, basically, even that was introduced by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj as an official, institutionalized, you could say, initiation. But the acceptance of the spiritual master, acceptance of his instructions in itself was sufficient. Prabhupada said that about one boy. Can't remember his name. It's in a letter. He wrote the letter to the temple. He said, he completely accepted me as his spiritual master and was following me. The boy got killed. He was sleeping in the hallway of the temple, and someone threw a firebomb through the letterbox, and he burnt to death. They would do things like that regularly in the early days of ISKCON. Attack the temples and so on in the West. So he died in that way, and Prabhupada said he went back to Godhead. Quick way to go. But because Prabhupada said he must have known him, he said he fully accepted me and I accepted him. Although he wasn't initiated, he was back to a robber or something. It's not just a matter of a string thread or whatever you have. In his householder life, Sripad B.S. Bhagavat Maharaj had been a doctor, and though well versed in secular knowledge, here is the story, here it is. He had no background of Shastra Gyan. Impressed by the Shastriya erudition of Srimad Bharati Maharaj and Srimad Bon Maharaj, and desiring to emulate them, he humbly requested Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to engage a Pandit disciple in teaching him scripture. This is the story I just mentioned. I didn't know it was in this section. And thus was directed to approach Ramdas Prabhu. Since at that time the number of Math members was considerable, Sripad Bhagavat Maharaj did not know who Ramdas Prabhu was. That the Sripad Bhagavat Maharaj was the name of this scholar, that he wasn't It's his name. He didn't know who he was. But after inquiring from others, he found him in the banana garden, cutting leaves to be used as plates. Ramdas Prabhu did not at all look like a pandit. Bhagavat Maharaj doubtingly requested him for lessons in Shastra. Being even more surprised than the Maharaj, Ramdas confessed his utter illiteracy and ignorance, and said there must have been some confusion. So Maharaj returned to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who immediately asked whether he had met Ramdas and learned from him. Bhagavat Maharaj pondered that perhaps his Gurudev was dissatisfied with him, because he'd already approached him, he'd already taken shelter, but he hadn't, learned the Shastras yet, and wanted to teach him a lesson by this instruction. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati again earnestly advised him to humbly approach Ramdas. After being repeatedly entreated by Sripad Bhagavat Maharaj, Ramdas Prabhu finally revealed in simple, penetrating words his practical realization of the truth of the Sevan Mukha Hi Jiva Do principle. I simply try to produce flowers and fruit for offering to the Lord. By doing so, I feel enlivened to always chant the holy names. I consider this the success of my life. Nothing very complicated. We make life so complicated. Imitation sometimes is another challenge which we have. Envy, maybe being put down. Sometimes we're belittled because, we appear to be very insignificant, What are you doing? You're just, washing the pots. Who do you think you are? Then Maharaj returned and reported this to his Gurudev, who commented that Ramdas Prabhu's insight was the essence of the Bhagavat philosophy, and quoted, Hetavad janma sapalyam dehi nam iha dehishu pranayar artar diyavacha shreya ara charanang sada. To sacrifice one's life, wealth, intellect and speech for the benefit of others is the highest mode of conduct for embodied beings. One should always act in this manner to make one's human birth successful. That's from the Srimad Bhagavatam, I think. Yeah, 10th Canto Bhagavatam. The previous verse, analogical to Ramdas's service, states, these trees fulfill one's desires with their leaves, flowers and fruits, their shade, roots, bark and wood, and also their fragrance, sap, ashes, pulp and shoots. They never studied the scriptures. They're trees. But then the next verse, they sacrifice their life, whatever wealth they've got, whatever little intellect, they have no necessary speech, everything they've sacrificed for the benefit of others is the highest mode of conduct for embodied beings. One should always act in this matter to make one's human birth successful. They were trees. This is referring to the trees. What to speak of humans. When a proposal came from Calcutta University that Gaudiya Math accept the charge of teaching Chaitanya Charitamrita therein, Srila Saraswati refused. He explained Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is not like an ordinary book meant for perusal by one and all. It is the supreme scripture, the cream of all spiritual literature, and cannot be understood by theoretical analysis. Not merely by reading Chaitanya Charitamrita can its meaning be realized. One must live purely and hearing from a genuine devotee. Toward the end of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's manifest pastimes, an elderly mundane scholar suggested that a Gaudiya Math edition of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu with elaborate commentary would be highly beneficial to the world. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied, it was not his purpose to compose books to satisfy the curiosity of academic readers. Yet Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was not wholly disinclined towards secular academic institutions and their methods. He commissioned his disciple, Sri Sangvidananda Das, a junior sibling and godbrother of Kunjabi Hari Prabhu, to write a PhD titled History and Literature of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas and their relation to other medieval Vaishnav schools at the University of London. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati himself formulated the outline for the thesis, which included an evaluation of himself and the Gaudiya Math. Upon conferral of the degree in 1935, the harmonists ran a report giving an abstract of the roughly 1,000-page draft and noting. I won't mention what it wrote, it's a little wordy. Comparative importance of various scriptures or writings. He writes, Srimad Bhagavatam is the first book to be read by persons on the spiritual trail. Sri Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam are the crest jewels of all scriptures. They are as great and worth taking refuge of as is Sri Krishna himself. Baba said these books are deities. They're worshipable. Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. And are transcendental manifestations of Krishna Kirtan, the literary form of Godhead. So we have Krishna Kirtan. Their books are Krishna Kirtan. Srila Saraswati Thakur did not advocate that all should undertake study of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, for these are intricate philosophical works in Sanskrit, difficult to understand, except by those of scholarly disposition. Bhagavad Gita is generally considered meant for guiding those within Varnashram, Karmis, Jnanis and Yogis, toward the path of devotion, and although introductory to the detailed spiritual knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita is itself quite complex. We get that all the time, don't you? People say they can't read it. They can read, but they can't. It's very complicated. They don't know what to do. Many people just like the esoteric aspect of it. It's almost like, wow, inconceivable. It's like something very kind of like. But they don't understand what I'm supposed to do with it. Srila Saraswati Thakur advised devotees to especially peruse the sections of Srimad Bhagavatam on Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. Especially because this Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. It said that with general people, if he spoke Bhagavad Gita, it was mostly on Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. He certainly didn't deal with the 10th canto with the general public. Now, how is it we're distributing all these books to the public? It seems a little bit out of place from what we've just read. We can't even understand them ourselves, let's face it. Practically speaking. Something, but not fully. So we're distributing them in mass, not just to interested people or scholars. We're distributing them in mass. And probably wanted these books to go to the scholars and the leaders of society. How have they got any capacity to understand a word of it? Maybe they don't. So why are we doing this?
Because before there were no commentaries by Prabhupada, but now the books are with the commentaries of Srila Prabhupada, so they can understand them better.
Exactly. That's the practical aspect, the realistic aspect, isn't it? There's a time aspect also concerned, that in due course of time they may become more eligible with Agyata Sakriti accumulating, assimilating. But the fact of the matter is that we've had devotees join this movement. Haribol. We've had devotees join this movement after having read the last volume that Srila Prabhupada translated, the 10th canto, was chapter 13. Chapter 13, who knows what that's called? Gopal, you know what it's called? Pardon? Wash?
You need to go to washroom.
We've got a washroom here. Where are you going to go? There's a room here? Okay. What is the 10th canto, chapter 13? It's the last chapter Prabhupada translated of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which was called? Yeah. Lord Brahma steals the calves and cowherd boys. Last chapter. So, for whatever reason, it was the first and second volumes of the 10th canto were printed, but the 13th chapter was not a part of that. It went up to chapter 12. So we're left with just chapter 13. Prabhupada didn't go beyond it. So the BBT printed just chapter 13 alone. Now, and we printed not a few, we printed 500,000. About 500,000 of this book in England. For the English, I think it was mostly we did in England. We had at least 300,000 in England for distribution. And as we're going on the street distributing this book as the main book. I mean, this is God, it's like... But you'd be surprised. Many people came to the temple having read that book and became devotees. And this is exactly what Mayapur said, because Prabhupada's purports were there. It makes the inaccessible somewhat accessible. The inconceivable somewhat conceivable. At least enough to go further, So the purports, Prabhupada said, are the main thing. You can't understand the verses practically. It's the purports which are the key. Sometimes we just rush through the verses. And I've read it. We haven't understood anything really. The purports should be carefully studied. And how it's relevant to us. Where do we get to? And he recommended Krishna Prema Tarangini, a Bengali verse adaptation of Srimad Bhagavatam by Sri Raghunath Bhagavatacharya, a disciple of Sri Gadadhar Pandit. I don't remember ever seeing that. Krishna Prema Tarangini. Has anyone ever heard of this? I've heard of it, but have you ever seen it? Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj recommended it. But he warned that unless read, here we go. In the original Sanskrit, weighty philosophical, unless read in the original Sanskrit, weighty philosophical works such as Govinda Bhasya are often not accurately grasped and cannot be properly appreciated unless studied under the guidance of a Vaishnava Acharya. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati stated that the Upanishads and the Gita were for the infant class. The Upanishads and the Gita are for the infant class. Like at school, the infant class is ABC, Whereas Srimad Bhagavatam is for postgraduates. To qualify for the postgraduate course, those who know nothing about spiritual life use Bhagavad Gita as the entrance exam. Persons desiring to attain a master's or doctorate degree in spiritual subject matter are required to study further. Nonetheless, objective devotees do not discriminate between Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. The variety of adjectives and grammatical explanations found in this world become beautiful at the lotus feet of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam expounds the constitutional duty of the spirit soul and is directly an avatar of Bhagavan. No one can shake Srimad Bhagavatam even a hair breadth from its unique position. Srimad Bhagavad Gita is recommended for the infant class in the spiritual school, as well as for new students who desire to enter the spiritual kingdom. Those who have become qualified by studying Bhagavad Gita and wish to attain higher spiritual knowledge can gain immense profit by properly hearing and studying Srimad Bhagavatam under a Mahabhagavat. Srimad Bhagavatam is directly the avatar of the Absolute Truth, not to be measured by our blunt material senses. Whatever is rare and confidential is well protected. Srimad Bhagavatam does not reveal himself to godless people. As he further extolled disappear, there is no loss if teaching and learning the Bhagavatam continues. Srila Saraswati Thakur often advised Bengalis and Ariyas, most of whom had at least sentimental faith in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and rudimentary acquaintance with Vaishnava philosophy, to first, this is interesting, this is for Bengalis by the way, not for others predominantly, to first study Chaitanya Bhagavat. First Chaitanya Bhagavat. And Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which although composed in simple Bengali verse, contain the essence of all scriptural conclusions and can immediately invoke the multifluous bhakti rasa offered by Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada writes in his commentary and purport that the day will come, Bhaktisiddhanta said, when people around the world will learn Bengali to study these scripts. And so he's advising this not to everyone but to the Bengalis, who know they already have some sentiment, but if they read in their own text, Bengali text, the Chaitanya Bhagavat and Chaitanya Charitamrita, they get the proper understanding. What can we understand if we don't read it? He directed beginners to first go through the relatively uncomplicated Chaitanya Bhagavat, then the more philosophically intricate Chaitanya Charitamrita, and only thereafter Srimad Bhagavatam. We see different situations, you could say, but it's the same principle in one sense, because we cannot understand Bhagavatam without, you could say, without the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Without accepting Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his mission, etc. To understand the Bhagavad will not be complete. Even if one is a devotee of other schools, one will not understand the essential, highest purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam. Only by the grace or the followers of Lord Chaitanya. So we approach Radha Krishna through Lord Chaitanya. We don't approach direct. Most Indians approach direct, therefore they never get the real understanding, or they never get that essential, let's say, result of devotional service. It's only being made available by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. No one else. There's no other approach. And his followers. He then often told his followers from time to time read Chaitanya Bhagavat, and would ask Bengalis who came to see him if they'd read it. He would quote Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur as having stressed the importance of reading Chaitanya Bhagavat, how even without reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, one could gain through Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat all essential truths of Shuddha Bhakti. We'll finish there. And I don't think most of us have ever read Chaitanya Bhagavat. You may have done, you may not have done, but it was never translated by Prabhupada, although he did want to. But there are translations available. It's a very ecstatic, you've read it, right? Chaitanya Bhagavat? Pasha. There's a very thorough commentary by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, translated, of course, from Bengali or whatever. Available, but it's quite a little later on. There's a simplified versions have been done by several devotees of just the text, basically. The text of Chaitanya Bhagavat are quite easy to follow, comparatively. You try to read Chaitanya Charitamrita. How many of you have read Chaitanya Charitamrita? 2 or 3? Still reading. If you can get over the first hurdle, it's like a hurdle race. If you can get over the first hurdle, it gets a bit easier after that. There are a few other high fences, but the first sections maybe the first 6 chapters or something, are quite high fences. You've really got to surrender. Otherwise it's just blindly, going through the pages, But to try to absorb. Oh, it looks like it's tea time. They've had enough of hearing and chanting already. They're eating time. Hope it's warm. Is it warm? Delicious samosas for everybody. Oh, kachori. My goodness. Yeah, Prabhupada loved kachoris. Big subject matter, it's unending. But what are we getting from this? Intense. What do you pick up from all of this? Anything?
We can merge our life into understanding the scripture, but if we forget the point that inquire from the spiritual master is the essence of spiritual life, then we will not get any advancement. If we don't serve the spiritual master and inquire from
Service, yeah, service. Service and inquiry. It's interesting, one of the one of the outlines of the life of his disciples, one of them, when he decided he was living with his family, decided to join the Gaudiya Mass. Sharirada Vijajal, Jadendriyata Hekam, Jive Fale Vishas Sagare, Dharma Jeji Vayati, Lobamaya Sadermati, Takidita Katina Samsare, Krishna Bodha Doyamoy, Gauri Bada Jiva Joy, Svapasadana Dilobai, Senamita Pau, Radha Krishna Gunagau, Mimidako Chaitanya Natai, Jainamai Ki Jai, Prabhupada Ki Jai, Mam Shivadaya Krishna Vastaya Vitale, Srimati Bhaktisiddhanta Swamiti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharine, Nirvasesha Sanyavadi Pastachade Shatarne. So this devotee was, this Bengali devotee, I think, he decided to join the Gaudiya Mass, and his mother, as he was leaving home, she said to him, "Listen carefully, Gopal. You're more absorbed in eating, I can see that." His mother said to him as he was leaving to join the temple, she said to her son, "Whatever happens in your life, don't forget the reason why you're going to join the Gaudiya Mass. Why are you going there?" Because the reason was he wanted to become Krishna conscious. He wanted to attain pure Shuddha Bhakti. Don't forget that. We get caught up sometimes in many ways, but we should not forget the goal. Certainly we have to play the rules. Certainly we have to know the techniques. Certainly we have to know what's the process of seva. But we have to know what the purpose behind it all is too. Purpose behind it is ultimately to awaken our love for Krishna. We shouldn't forget that and get caught up in other things. We have to do other things. We have to focus on it. Of course, that's part of our lives and part of our endeavoring to serve. So what else can we get out of this little reading? That the importance of not licking on the bottle of honey, but we have to become eligible to open, to understand what's inside. We have to taste it. But the taste is not just reading it. The taste comes from the revelation which Krishna gives when we have that service attitude. What else? Anything else? I guess that's the thrust of it, really. Anything else? Do you remember anything else whatsoever? Some of you have been taking notes.
It was nice point. Real learning is preaching.
Yes. Real learning is preaching, and the effect of real learning is you will preach. You want to distribute what you've received. You realize that that's our business, or purposeful business of study, is to preach it. That is the order of Lord Chaitanya, isn't it? Did he not give that instruction to the Kurma Brahmana? What did he say?
Stay here. And then you preach to the family.
Yeah, you preach where you are. Yada deka tarakala Krishna Pradesh. Whatever you've learned, whatever you imbibe from Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, you stay here and you teach that to others. You don't have to go anywhere. Wherever you are, you do it. You share that. Anything else? That's interesting point. What's up? What's that mean? What's that mean? Where are you going? What are you pointing at? Oh, somebody hiding away there, is it? Hare Krishna. Anything else? Shamananda? He's already in that mood of service. Huh? He may not be a scholar, but he certainly likes to serve.
So he's considered Bhagavatam very advanced. That's probably because not everybody knew Sanskrit.
Yeah, that in certain situations he made it clear that the Srimad Bhagavatam, that was especially, as you said yourself, that at that time there may not have been a commentary to guide one, but the actual Srimad Bhagavatam is very complicated, complex. To be able to imbibe the truths therein. Bhagavad Gita, he also said, was not easy. And that's one of the reasons why there are other books too. They're supposed to be, whatever you call it now, they call bridge books. We didn't really have bridge books during Prabhupada's time. They were all pretty much straightforward, just in smaller version. But then bridge books coming in like Higher Taste, coming back, Chant to Be Happy, and even more bridge books now which are literally, kind of like compilations, just simply to try to attract people somewhat towards Krishna consciousness. But the Back to Godhead was supposed to be the introductory literature of our movement. Many of us came, I came by reading Back to Godhead. I didn't receive a book, I received the Back to God. That's what convinced me. Many devotees like that in the early days. Prabhupada one is Back to God. He said it's the backbone of our movement. It's something which we're not doing. I don't know if it really makes a big difference. It may do. It's something which is not going on. It's going on in India to some degree, but not elsewhere. Who goes on the street to distribute Back to Godhead? The writings in Back to Godhead are just some good writers, there's no doubt about that, but they're not geared towards the public. They're not geared as a preaching tool. They're more in-house tool. But the Back to Godhead was meant to be a preaching tool. Prabhupada started Back to Godhead magazine on the order of his Guru Maharaj. And it was topical. In the beginning, when Prabhupada started, it was a topical newsprint. It wasn't just philosophical articles, but it was putting the world topical situations in perspective of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, etc. With war or economic collapse or whatever was going on. Prabhupada would write articles in relationship to that. And that's we don't have that type of literature for distribution to the public. It's something which perhaps somebody will take on one day. And that's Prabhupada's Back to Godhead magazine. It wasn't the mood in the early days to do that either. The boys weren't ready for that. The articles were pretty simplistic philosophy. They weren't topical very much, very rarely. Some were, but very few. Not in the very early. In the very early they were, but they were too topical. It was like kind of like writing about the glories of Timothy Leary and Ralph Emerson and, you know, Shakespeare and all sorts of weirdos, you know. Because that's what devotees were into, you know. And they would be, that wasn't what Prabhupada envisioned as Back to Godhead magazine, you know. It's a mishmash of various Mayavadis and what have you, or mundaners. But after a while it became pure, very pure, and just simple philosophy. Attracted me. And then, it's for donations, by the way. Shyamananda's collecting donations. Put your donations in the bag. And then they bought a few topical, but mostly they were like 2 years late, you know. It's oftentimes 2 years out of date. You know, by the time it came in the magazine, people have forgotten about it, you know. These things are dated. They're dated. And then people have been late to them. If you look at the, which we do sometimes for the sake of seeing what they're doing, we have Jehovah's Witnesses. You ever heard of the Jehovah's Witnesses? They're on almost every block, practically, in some places. In Paris, they're like on every suburb you see them there. Outside every metro station, practically, and major junction. And they stand there all day. They don't do much. They just stand there all day. Sometimes nothing happens. They just stand there all day talking to each other. Occasionally people come up, but not much. Occasionally they take a book or magazine. But if you look at our magazine, it's kind of interesting. What do they call it? Watchtower or something? English? Watchtower. Something like that. But they do. They try to hone in on exactly what's in people's minds right now. You know, they're quite up to date on that, and not their conclusion may not be very interesting to the public, but they don't have a very, you know, practical or scientific approach. It all comes down to surrender to Jesus or something, you know. Yeah.
I have a statistic from Vaisheshika Prabhu about what they distribute in numbers. It was from 2015, and they distributed in 239 countries, 539 languages, about 46 million copies a month.
A month?
A month.
In how many languages?
439.
Languages. That's almost every language on the planet, almost. Well, they do have hundreds of thousands of people out every day on the street. Hundreds of thousands. Very, very well organized. And very systematic. Extremely well organized. And they have a lot of financial backing.
Also kind of part of their teaching. They must go.
They have to do it as part of, it's like going in the army in some places you have to. Anyone who's a member, they have to spend a certain period of time going out in pairs. I think they go in pairs.
They're covering the whole day. Like some people are there in morning.
Correct.
And then another shift coming.
Exactly.
Afternoon shift
Exactly.
and evening shift.
Yep.
So basically they cover the whole
They you see them 8 o'clock when you go in the morning, and they're still there at 7 at night. But it's not the same people. They change 2 or 3 times during the day. They're very, very well organized. Very simplistic, but very, very well organized. Organization, as you're quoting Vaisheshika, is one of the keys to increasing book distribution. It's not just having books and trying to distribute them, but organizing also is essential. And they're super organized, but don't forget they are giving their literature free of charge. I guess if people go give a donation, they'll accept it. I don't know. But they don't charge you, right? They don't charge. They're happy to give it because they have big financial backing. Big financial backing. Very many big, rich industrialists in America, particularly. So they put their emphasis on that. In ISKCON, emphasis is very widespread. I mean, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj mentioned several times about the, tearing down the temples. He didn't just say the marble. We read in another lecture he gave. Better we just remove all the temples and just print books. Well, they do have their meeting halls. They don't have quite the sophistication that we do. They have many numerical places all over the world. They have their meeting halls. Huh? They're so organized. In Wellington, Wellington devotees have left now, but right next to our temple there's a Jehovah Witness hall, just 50 meters away. They're so organized, it's unreal. We've been trying to build a temple for 30 years and still haven't done it. In 10 days they constructed this hall. Big hall. 200 Jehovah's came and worked non-stop for a week. They had engineers, builders, plumbers, electricians in that community. They all came and organized the workers. In less than 2 weeks they finished, they were in there. Takes us, 25 years and we still haven't, started, They're so organized. 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. Couldn't believe it.
I have one question, Maharaj, according to that. So, why, as a devotee, we try to preach pure bhakti, and those facilities are not coming to us, but for them, they still preach some
And the devotees, how much are we really serious about Shuddha Bhakti? What's the point of having a temple? Why did Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj leave when he left? You know why? He left at 62 years of age. He's quite young, materially speaking. Why did he leave?
Many neophytes were joining the movement.
Yeah, or they were advancing and falling back. Slipping back. So that's why he was made comments about the Bag Bazaar temple. It was not small compared to many of our temples, but because they were, what's the point of having these facilities if you're a neophyte? These temples are for cultivation of Shuddha Bhakti, not just to accommodate neophytes. But, it can become a weight that drags you down when you have it's a risk. Everything's a risk. You've got to take those risks. Temple of Vedic Planetarium could be a big risk. Lord Chaitanya's grace and Bhaktivinoda and others would be protected. But otherwise, neophytes get control and it's all lost. The purpose is lost. It's just a money-making tourist attraction. Very minimal benefit. The purpose of a temple is to facilitate the cultivation of Shuddha Bhakti, not just to accommodate everyone's neophyte desires. They may come and become purified, but the real purpose of the temple, one of our shortcomings as far as my little understanding is concerned, we have not yet developed much outside of the institution which is meant for cultivating Shuddha Bhakti. But we've introduced that which is not aimed at Shuddha Bhakti into the temple. So the temple becomes a mishmash. It is not focused on its purpose. It's focused on trying to accommodate everyone and anybody, and therefore you don't get anywhere really with anything. It's all clogged up. It's clogged up, constipated. There was a stay in the temple who have no interest in, Shuddha Bhakti, practically speaking. In many cases. They're employed. There is no question of having employed pujaris, etc. But every temple in ISKCON practically has employed pujaris. Because of, you can say, necessity or whatever. But that's not essentially what a temple's for. So one questions, do you really need temples? You need facility to cultivate Shuddha Bhakti. But you also need facilities for those who are not on that present, you could say, mentality, or they're not in that present initiative. They want mixed, but if they associate with, just like in Kirtan, you see what's happening in Kirtan world. You watch the Kirtan melas, looks like a you know, a fancy dress party, right? Latest hairstyles, everything you can imagine, all the latest tunes from the world around you, implemented into kirtan. Any instrument under the sun, it's good for the general population, but not for the cultivation of Shuddha Bhakti. It's a different kirtan. It's good for the general population. So if the leaders of the kirtan, even though they're using techniques like that, musical sounds, tunes, instruments, dress, whatever it is that brings people along, we heard of the innovativeness of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj in this regard, to how to bring people to Shuddha Bhakti. He didn't compromise with his inner circles, but with the public, you could say there was that he used this Yukta Vairagya principle with his theistic exhibitions. We heard the other day when he put on these huge theistic exhibitions covering a whole square mile. That means 1.5 kilometers in each direction. The theistic exhibition covered the whole area. He had a boxing ring in there. He brought boxers in from Calcutta in Mayapur to fight with each other. He brought Mayavadis in. He had all kinds of nonsense there. So that over 1 million people came. And, they had to go through, it's like you go to an IKEA store. I don't know if you've ever been to an IKEA store. All you want to buy is a cabinet, but you've got to go through a maze to reach that section, You go through an airport, you're trying to get out of the airport. It takes you round like this through all these liquor and perfume stores for like 15 minutes before you get out or in. So it's like that. Then they would come to, the pure theistic display with kirtan and this and that. Somehow or another. So that's, you could say, but the goal wasn't to have boxing and this, that and the other. But for people in general who have no connection, these type of things can be there. But it's not for those who really want to cultivate. It's like we bring it in at every level. Same with the prasadam, all the fancy things and compromised things that we introduce, tofu and this, that and the other. Chicken legs, vegetarian chicken legs. That's not for those who want to cultivate Shuddha Bhakti. That's for those who are gross meat eaters. It just reminds you of material life, that's all. Or listen to, Prabhupada said that, for instance, with great devotee. Mangalananda did a fantastic service, bringing out all these records, change of heart, Prabhupada, that beautiful song about Prabhupada, all these things. Prabhupada said it's very nice, but this is for the public. It's not something that's going to help you to develop. Maybe at a certain stage we need that too. We're not really very advanced. But if we're really on the path to Shuddha Bhakti, that's not the sort of music you're going to listen to. I was watching Paravida's Prabhu's latest. I had to do it because I want someone else to look at it. Anyway, I eventually watched it just so I could comment, And, because if I don't, he will never forgive me. He's got a certain air. We have a certain relation. So I commented briefly about how wonderful he's using this principle of Yukta Vairagya and so on to attract people. But I have no interest in watching it whatsoever. But for the public, it's like, and the devotees are sitting around there all laughing, they're breaking their stitch. They're just, because it's mundane entertainment, but it's got a twist of philosophy there. There's a philosophy there, so it's fine. But it's, it's for the public. It's not for the, for very, very neophytes. It's entertainment. So the culture is a kind of part of the culture. But the real culture is to cultivate Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion. It's not, all these other things. Even the Vaidhi Bhakti is essential as a step towards that, but it's not the absolute thing. It's just a step towards the reality of devotional service. And unless we're freed entirely of the interest in all of these mundane introductions, there's no question of, spontaneous devotion. Only if we associate with persons who have spontaneous devotion, then we can maybe become attracted towards that in time, purification. But if we continually default towards these other issues, or these other aspects, then we stay on that level. We don't progress. There has to be a change there. But it's difficult when the temple has that as part of its policy, basically. Compromise. It's difficult for those who want Shuddha Bhakti. It's extremely difficult. You know that. Any temple you go to, practically, not every temple, but most temples, there's a kind of a compromise situation. Now, it's not the fault of, it's just the way it is. It's a kind of an institutional shortcoming. There has to be facility for different devotees at different stages. And in most cases, we don't have it. Now, I'm going to give credit to somebody who's not to be usually credited. His name's Kirtanandan Swami. But right in 1969, 1970, he saw this. He established at New Vrindavan an area where they called it Taliban, where the devotees who just could not give up smoking lived there. They didn't have anything to do with the devotees who were Brahmins who lived over there. They were welcome to the temple, but they weren't expected. They were encouraged. It's like, but you can't clog the temple up like this with devotees who should be in Taliban. Because he lost the thread, lost the, what do you call it? But, he had, it's just a Vedic system, that's all, simple as pie. Simple as pie. But, that's the way it is right now. We haven't got the, we haven't come there yet. That's Varnashram, simple as that. It's of course a lot more to it than that, but that's just one aspect of it.
Maharaj, is Krishna purifying slowly the conditioned souls with his partially absolute truth hidden in Jehovah's Witness, for example? Or is it more that this is misleading?
Well, it's usually considered to be a cheating process. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, because their conclusion. So are they being slowly purified or becoming, let's say, eligible to see further? A good question. Bhaktivinoda Thakur generally saw it like that. Generally speaking, he talked like that. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was a little bit more black and white on this. Why? Well, one reason I see is because he was very strongly trying to cultivate Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion. And he didn't want the danger of any compromise to become institutionally part of his mission, direct mission. To bring all these other, Bhaktivinoda talks about it even when going into the church, wherever you show respect, which we do, of course we do. Definitely, because I don't know about the Jehovah's Witness, who they follow. I've got no idea. They're doing something. There's some piety there. They're mentioning the name of Jesus, no doubt about that. There's something there. It's a very slow process. And to the degree, if offences, I don't find the Jehovah's Witnesses, person to person, a very offensive mentality. I find them quite friendly. I don't know what others' experience are. In general, I find them quite friendly. I wouldn't say, forthright, but they're not on the aggressive side. Something, perhaps a little bit pious there when they see, well, what they're seeing, I don't know. What we're presenting is another thing, but the reaction to Shuddha Bhakti, in one sense, determines the degree of a person's piety. So how do they respond? Are they being purified? Well, if they're offending Shuddha Bhakti, are they becoming purified? By the grace of the devotees, by the grace of Lord Jesus, maybe something's happening there for their benefit, no doubt. Something's there. We don't want to decry anything or look down on anyone. Who are we? We've got to look at our own hearts. Are we becoming purified? Are we actually doing what we say we're doing? Are we following our path? It's easy to, Not easy, but sometimes we can judge others, but we have to look at our own path very carefully. Generally, Prabhupada would encourage all religions to follow their original teaching, their preceptors, who Prabhupada would see. I don't know, who is the Jehovah's Witness following? They have a leader, they have a guru, they have a preceptor. Who is it? The Mormons, they have, what's his name? Self-manifested Messiah. What was his name? It's a very interesting topic. I've never really heard very much expansion on that one. We'd like to say in every case yes, but if it's really cheating people, denying people, cheating is denying people the path of Shuddha Bhakti, that's cheating. So to what degree they're making that inaccessible? And in many cases they are. They deny it.
As far as I know, they also follow Bible, but they do their own translation.
Their own interpretation of the Bible.
Yeah, they go to the original scriptures and translate it.
Yeah, like every text, there's many interpretations given by in particular individuals, enlightened or otherwise. But the exact founder of the Jehovah's Witness? I mean, the most Christians are chanting the name of Jesus, even if it is with a wrong understanding or an offensive mentality. Something remotely connected to that is there. Some rules and regulations are there, and maybe they're founded on the original teachings. Who is it? Does it say who their founder is? Everyone should be encouraged. Charles?
1870.
Quite recent, 1870. We have another group in Philippines. They're called the, in the Philippines, what they call them? Oh God, they're huge offshoots like this. They're mostly, I don't know, some very charismatic person who attracts people with certain conditionings. But how far they go on the spiritual path is another thing. At least there's some, because there's some mundane piety for sure. There's some relationship with Jesus for sure, that's for certain. And to the degree that they're relating to Shuddha Bhakti, how they relate to it, at least if they're not offensive or something, you can understand something's there in terms of Shuddha Bhakti. But what's there in terms of the broader picture and what benefit they're really getting? Are they going to heaven? I don't know, maybe.
That's what they want.
That's what they want. Yeah. Which itself, of course, for one on the Shuddha Bhakti path is a terrible thing to aspire for. Dreadful.
You come back and...
Yeah, well, you're making God your order supplier. You're looking at him as, if that doesn't transform into understanding the difference between master and servant, then it hasn't really gone anywhere. It might take many lifetimes, God knows how many. Offensive chanting, Bahujama Kariyari Shravana Kirtana, wherever you are, can take millions of lifetimes. There has to be a change of heart there, of realizing that God is not our order supplier. He's not our order supplier. He is, he's reciprocating, you could say. But it's not our business to make him our order supplier. Pray to God so you get what you want. He's not like that. That's not Shuddha Bhakti in any way whatsoever. So the lack of guidance, if they take guidance, that's fine. I don't know who their guides are other than whatever. Conditional understanding. Anything else on that?
Yeah, they merged from a group.
They merged? Emerged.
They emerged
Uh-huh.
from a group which was called the International Society
Of Krishna Consciousness.
of
Bible?
Researchers of the Bible.
Researchers of the Bible.
Serious researchers of the Bible.
Scholars, scholastic approach.
Yeah, and more or less it is also mentioned
Theosophists.
they believe in that's because of the present condition of the world that some kind of Armageddon will come, and
Yeah.
that then the kingdom of God will
Yeah.
be re-established.
A lot of speculation, a child dreaming almost. You know? Someone's at the door, I don't know who it is.
And they are just speaking.
Huh?
They will sit down speaking together. They are arranging.
Oh, that's nice. The boys are speaking together. Well, they're coming in as well. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Maybe
Yeah.
they refer to Satya Yuga.
Pardon?
Maybe they refer to Satya Yuga.
Yeah, back to, that's what they're, perhaps that's what they're cottoning on to, the start of, it's kind of interesting perspective. Maybe that's what they're talking about. It's like we were talking about the Noah's Ark the other day in the class, in the Bhagavatam class. It was describing there in the Srimad Bhagavatam how the Matsya avatar, Satyavata, is Satyavata Muni? And Matsya avatar, how he was told to Satyavata to, no, who was told? Anyway, whatever it was, there's two stories in it. Yeah, to fill this boat, the boat would appear and they'd fill it up with all the herbs and different animals and species, and it was the ocean of devastation. The boat will be protected by Matsya, and then at the end of the devastation, next age would begin, and they'd all come out. It's like the Noah's Ark. It's taken from this, from the Bhagavatam account, and simplified in biblical terminology. So maybe that also is coming from a similar thing, like the end of Kali Yuga and then the Satya Yuga begins. Although there's some kind of, not exactly a devastation, but changes. Maybe something like that. But whether they be born in Satya Yuga is another thing. It depends. We're not the judge of that. We like to encourage everyone.
I just wanted to ask you if the lack of the pure devotional focus of the temples is caused by the lack of the pure devotees staying at those temples, or just the management that
We're lacking. We're lacking in, on many areas. Certainly most of our temples are circumstantially also, they've developed the way they were, and in the 70s, as we all know, the temples were full, and although we wouldn't say we're pure devotees, but everyone was engaged in pure devotional service. Definitely we weren't on a level of pure devotion, but we were engaged in pure devotion. 24 hours a day service, no remuneration, submissive mood, everyone attending all the programs. So it's the path, which is generally the path, which is a natural path of one who's pure devotion. They're fully engaged, one of the characteristics. So that itself was the situation. So that isn't the situation in many temples now. It is in some, but many not the case. So where does the fault lie, or what is it? It's a big question, because the temples were developed like that. You take a situation of many of our temples in ISKCON, in the West particularly. India is the opposite. Temples are recently developing. There are very few temples during Prabhupada's time, maybe 5 or 6. Now there's like hundreds of temples of ISKCON in India, big ones, and many of them have like 70, 80, 150, 250 brahmacharis living in them, all fully engaged. That isn't the case in most Western temples, to say the least. Most Western temples are struggling to keep the deity worship going. And like in France, and probably in many countries, and you don't know, you're stuck. And there are older devotees, for whatever reason, have health-wise sometimes, or simply lost the taste for pure devotion, can't do it anymore, got into bad association, got into a rut, had some problems, whatever it may be. are there, and it's often difficult to change the dynamic, especially when there's no alternative, or the alternatives are not very favorable. It's something which is sooner or later it's going to have to be, I'd say probably, I'm not God, I'm not the doer, but from my understanding it's going to have to be dealt with sooner or later. How, I don't know. We'll have to be seen. There are many devotees working in this direction to try to establish some Varna ashram situation more favorable to the devotees. This, Prabhupada emphasized Varna ashram to facilitate especially the devotees, not so much the public. Not everybody fits into living in, strictly speaking, in the temple. In New Mayapur we have a really difficult task because the temple building is not a temple building. It's a multi-purpose building. And it's not designed at all for a temple building. Take a big number of, I don't want to credit or give the term right, but dedicated devotees to live in that building to make it function as a serious temple. They had 200 devotees there at one time, and all fully engaged. So we're not in that situation now, and that's the case in many places. And therefore we resort, having necessary, devotees are running guest houses, they're running seminars on distant related topics, not necessarily pure devotional topics. They're doing tours, they're doing yoga retreats, they're doing, businesses, all in the kind of like temple auspices, These things should be there, but they should, in my opinion, they should be done by a different body altogether with, totally different mindset. Nothing to do with those cultivating Shuddha Bhakti. Those who are should be cultivating Shuddha Bhakti are often managing all these other things, restaurants and farms and tourists, ordinary schools with not really gurukuls, etc., etc. And dealing with numerous social issues. Most of them, not most, but many of them are a result of modern day craziness. Modern education, modern everything, finances. And everyone's affected by all this, social media. And it's very difficult to cultivate Shuddha Bhakti in these situations. There's no forum. Very difficult. The temple should be that forum, but it's multitasking going on. And even if you are, you're expected to deal with all these other issues too. Even if you are, let's say, wanting or desperately trying, you're caught up in all these other issues day and night. Day and night. Gurus in this movement, 90% of the time they have to deal with devotees, confused minds. 90%. It's the social issues. These are things that should be dealt with in society. Gurus are to help you to come towards Shuddha Bhakti, not to deal with your marriage or your house or your business or whatever it is. The next door neighbor, your husband, your wife. We haven't gone much beyond. But the dynamics of our movement have changed so radically since the 1970s, where everyone was like doing the same thing. Everyone was like one-pointed, more or less. There was no congregation. You were in or out, one or the other. There was no in-between. If you're out, well, best of luck. You can come to the temple. And then, of course, things changed in the 70s, but the early 70s was like that. Now it's not that it's like that. That is what it is. It's 99% of the devotees are in that situation. They were initiated, they're living outside, they're married, they're struggling to get their economics together, they're struggling with their family, they're struggling with their minds, they're struggling with what to do, they're struggling with the management of the temple, they're struggling with everything practically. And then offences come in. You start blaming people. Basically, we're wrongly situated, and if you're wrongly situated, you're not going to do your job very well, and then you get blamed. And it's like a whirlwind. Danger when devotees leave, and nothing happens. It doesn't grow. Another crew in, and another crew leaves, and another crew comes in. Things go on. Anyway, that's a bit of a negative picture, but it's also somewhat realistic. There needs to be, I don't know what to say, a big thought on this. And GBC members themselves, I was talked to recently, we have no time to think of all these things. We're like firemen. We're spending all our time putting out trying to put fires out. We have no time to think of growth. Yes, they do. Not enough. It comes automatically. Varnashram system's there. It's just beyond our ability to perceive. It comes when the heart's purified. Prabhupada wanted to show us how to go in that direction. It didn't happen directly. Gave a little bit of a framework, but not much more. A huge topic. But my little take on that, it will require, really advanced consciousness to evoke that. Faith, clarity of direction, etc. Otherwise, selfish motivations come in, mundane conditioning comes in, we get controlled by the world around us, the mood of the day. Right now that's a big issue in the world today, isn't it? Introducing tradition as against modernism or whatever it's called. Big thing. On almost every leg. Almost. Dress, food, philosophy, standards of behavior, everything. And that will change again, don't worry, after 40 years you're going to have to adjust it all again. That fad will disappear, and there'll be another one. And they'll condemn that fad which you go like this. Things are always changing. How to adopt this without the change in the heart and being able to share that with others so others can, in their conditioned situation, without the heart being pure. It's what's required. Prabhupada wanted to cultivate the Brahminical culture. That wasn't the only thing he wanted to cultivate, but that was what's first priority. And it's not, as we said, it's not just about learning. It's not just knowing how to wave the fans and throw the water or snap your fingers, mumble some mantras, and then go and watch the television. Start fault finding, etc. Yes. It's a big topic. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Where congregation or chanting of the holy name is the easiest thing to take recourse to, because that, Deva Goswami says, is faultless. He says every other effort can be faulted. You'll find fault in a sense that it'd be difficult to make progress there. We're not aiming at just creating a nice social scene to facilitate persons of a similar karma. That's not what ISKCON is doing. You see everyone in this movement, how vastly different we are. Very different in so many ways. Coming from different cultures, different backgrounds, different everything practically. The only thing that would gel this is pure devotional service. Otherwise, We're all so different. It's not like, I mean, I guess in the Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't know to what degree they have. I know with the Amish, the Mormons, many groups, the Jews, there's very much a family circle involved. Strong family, Muslims, especially Christians to a lesser degree. It was very strong, but lesser now. It's like you don't dare step outside of the tradition, isn't it? It's like a crime. You're condemned for life if you step outside, literally. In some groups, they'll kill you if you step outside. You're on death warrant. So there's like a lot of pressure there, which really isn't there much in ISKCON. Sometimes it's the opposite, Go away. Get out, please. We don't have that type of, we're young, you could say, but Jehovah's are only you're young in terms of modern society, but they're not very old either. You just said they're 150 years ago when they kicked off. That's not very long. We're 50, 60, whatever. And but because of the height, or the, it's like you're aiming at the highest. So very not to expect that everyone's going to be aimed for that, but to help everyone else to come up there. If you try to jump, if you have a bar which is 8 foot tall, I don't know what the highest. What's the highest that anyone can jump in the world right now? What's the world record? I know what it is. You might be. Are you a high jumper?
I ride.
You're a high jumper. What's the highest world record high jump?
Oh, this I don't know.
You jump high, but you don't know what the high. Over a pole. You know the pole.
Yeah.
Jump over it.
Yeah.
I like long jumping. I wasn't a high jumper. I was a long jumper. Anyway, whatever it is, 8 foot, 2 meters, 2.5 meters.
More than that.
Huh?
More than that.
Is it 2.5 meters? That's a height.
Yeah.
That's almost as high as this room.
245.
2 meters, 2.5 meters.
Yeah.
I was right. 2.5 meters. Well, if I say your job is to jump 2.5 meters, that's your service. What will you do?
And there already.
You'll give up, right? I can't do this. Okay, your job is 1 meter. Oh, I can do that. And you'll do it. Okay, next month, 1 meter and 10 1 meter and 10 centimeters. Oh, that's what I can do. You have to know where you can jump. But if you set the bar at 2 meters, you're going to give up. You're going to become disheartened. Someone else has done 2 meters. And if they're not pure, they look down. Gold medalist, look at me. I'm going to beat you. So you have to set the goal, the bar, like in education, a level that can be achieved, achievable level. But knowing ultimately what the highest goal. Sometimes you give up. It seems impossible. Prabhu, I can't do this. I can't do this. Chant 16 rounds a day. It's too much. I can't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's too much. 4 regulated principles. Oh no. Can't do it. Okay? Those are Brahminical principles, by the way. Tapa want to establish a Brahminical society. They are Brahminical principles. But the vast majority of people are not immediately going to take that up. They may in due course of time. So where do they go? And the vast majority of devotees may not be able to follow that. Let's be honest. That doesn't exclude them from Lord Chaitanya's movement in any way. Place for everyone. But we haven't perhaps quite been able to do that yet. We're small. The world around us is against this, by the way. The material energy in general is not working in that direction. People in general are not interested in pure devotional service. Simple as that. And the more you see pure devotional service, the more painful it comes to people in general who are not interested. It's a big danger, a threat to them. As they said in America, right? In the 70s at one point, One politician said, if this Hare Krishna movement carries on like it is now, it will take over the government. They were scared. It was accelerating, you see, at that point. And there was not the congregation aspect involved. Yeah, dangerous. Because it can debunk all of their, whatever, nonsense. They certainly don't want that. So they're watching, careful. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We need Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj here now. As Bhakti Vikash Maharaj said at the beginning of his lecture in Mayapur when he was speaking on Bhakti's, right at the beginning he said, I don't know how many of us, we like to hear about him, we love to hear about him, but how many of us would be able to bear being with him is another thing. That's another thing. In our kind of situation. Haribol Prabhu, how's it going? How's your wife? How's the kids? What's going on in wherever you're from, Germany? Yeah. I heard there's some problems there with the government. How's it going over there? The conversations are sometimes like that. How's so and so? How's so and so? How's this one? How's that one? Wasn't much room for that in Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's time. Prabhu, I'm a Brahmin. I don't serve prasadam. That's for the Bhaktas. And then you criticize the Bhaktas for serving. Often that's what happens. If no one serves, then a Bhakta serves, and then you complain about the servant. It goes on. It's a regular thing. It wasn't the mood in the Gaudiya Mass. Even now, in many places, only the sannyasis serve prasadam. There aren't many of sannyasis, but maybe there are in some places. Different mood. What to do? Pride. Are you asking me? You're about to say. They're here, maybe we're not ready to appreciate their presence. Everyone's in the charge to some extent. To the extent that you present, the truth. You're acting in that role. But if you mean in a sense of some empowered personality of a degree of your problem, you say, Lord Chaitanya, 2 days, day after tomorrow, the Vaitacharya Haridas were praying for, Bhakti Vinod was praying for that. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj sometimes expressed disheartened disgust almost at the fact that he just wanted at least one pure soul. He became, amongst his disciples, he could see that one wasn't manifesting. At least not in his presence. Some of them seemed to be extremely advanced and even recognized their great advancement, but it didn't work. Still didn't go. It was only later when Srila Prabhupada took up that torch and set the world alight. So yes, it's going on in small ways here, there, and everywhere. But when you say the level you're talking is a little different. It may not be. It may be a broad, let's say cooperative. Prabhupada said cooperative. So maybe a broad cooperative of devotees who do have a united, different details, but united approach. Maybe. Who will work together to establish that. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj wanted that GBC to be that. They didn't do it. Prabhupada wanted the same thing. We have a GBC. Let's see which direction it's going, but they're not in a position, most of them, to really cultivate Shuddha Bhakti in the sense that, they're so tied up in so many things. Krishna can give that. It's not something we can make happen. But, certain things could be adjusted, maybe. It seems to be happening. I think now most I don't know. There's not many GBCs remaining who were there, say, 15 years ago. Not so many now. This year, Radhanath Maharaj resigned, Ranjan Swami resigned, Gunagrai, Bhakti Marg Swami resigned, Malati resigned, and Bhakti Bhushan Maharaj resigned. So hopefully they'll all, be able to spend more time in preaching and in, helping devotees to cultivate pure devotion. Hopefully. Let's see. Radha Maharaj was Naranjan Maharaj. They're doing it anyway. They never really were meant for that administrative part, but they inspired others to do it. So great service done. Let's see what Krishna's plans are. Hare Krishna. So you become an acharya. Prabhupada wanted that. He wanted all of his disciples to become acharyas. So it's not very difficult. You just have to follow the previous acharya. And yes, to some extent, even if just like we saw with Ramdas, he's an acharya. He's teaching how to render pure devotional service. Jayananda was an acharya. Maybe not on that level of, obviously, Srila Prabhupada or Bhaktisiddhanta, but he's acting as an acharya, teaching by example, showing by example. Not just saying, but showing by example. And they have the right concept. They understand that it's meant for the pleasure of Krishna, not for self-aggrandizement or for some other agenda, but for the pleasure of Krishna. So they're acharya. They may not be empowered in the same way, but they're acharya. So everyone can be acharya. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai, Gaur Premanandi.